A stormy night. 3 children desperate for shelter. A woman with nothing left but the strength to open her door. From that moment, a chain of choices began that would stretch across 25 years, shaping lives, twisting loyalties, and planting a secret so devastating it could tear apart everything they built. The truth is never what it first seems, and the enemy who rises in the end is not the one anyone expected. This is a story of sacrifice and betrayal, of love tested against the darkest vengeance, and of a family forced to prove that hope is stronger than hate. Tell me what you think of this opening twist in the comments and where you're watching from. And remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss what follows. The courtroom felt more like a tomb than a place of justice, heavy with silence and suffocating with the weight of inevitability. Angela Monroe sat at the defendant's table, her posture straight despite the chains around her wrists, her face composed though the years of weariness could not be hidden from anyone with eyes to see. At 68, she was a woman who carried herself with the kind of dignity born from decades of hardship, the kind of dignity that could not be taken away even by the harshest verdict. She had been prepared for this moment from the day Victor Hale reappeared, slipping forged documents and counterfeit evidence into the system like poison in water. The prosecutor's voice droned on, crisp and cruel, listing her alleged crimes as if he were reading off a grocery list. First-degree murder, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. Each charge struck like a hammer, but Angela did not flinch. The jurors avoided her gaze, their decision already sealed, their consciences already tucked away behind the excuse that they were simply following the evidence. The judge, an old man with a face carved into indifference, lifted his gavel and in a voice devoid of mercy pronounced, "Angela Monroe, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." A ripple ran through the gallery, some gasps, some whispers, and the cold click of pens from the reporters who would soon scatter headlines across the morning papers. Elderly woman masterminds criminal empire. Angela closed her eyes, exhaled softly, and prepared to stand when the bailiffs came to lead her away. But before the silence could congeal into finality, the echo of heavy footsteps broke through the stillness. 3 men, tall, strong, and commanding in presence, entered the courtroom from the back. They were not strangers, not to Angela. Her eyes opened wide as recognition struck her heart with the force of lightning. These were her boys, the children she had taken in on a rainy night decades ago, frightened and hungry. The children she had raised as her own when the world had abandoned them. Now they stood as men, each shaped by a life of struggle and triumph, each carrying in his bearing a piece of her love that had sustained them. Christopher "Chris" Langston strode forward first, broad-shouldered, with a confident bearing of a seasoned attorney who had dismantled corrupt systems in courts far greater than this one. His eyes burned with controlled fire as he fixed them on the judge. Beside him walked Robert "Rob" Langston, calm and steady, the presence of a surgeon evident in his precise steps and his calm breath, a man who had walked through rooms of life and death and chosen courage each time. Jonathan "John" Langston came last, wiry, restless, his gaze sharp and his hands twitching with the energy of someone who had lived in shadows, hacking into walls of secrecy, learning how power truly operated beneath the surface. They wore suits that spoke of success, but their eyes spoke of something deeper, unbreakable loyalty to the woman chained at the defendant's table. The gallery erupted in murmurs as the men moved past the bailiffs, who struggled to block their way. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order. Remove them immediately." Chris raised his hand, holding a thick folder that seemed to vibrate with the weight of truth. "Your Honor," his voice rang through the chamber, clear and unwavering, "this conviction cannot stand." The prosecutor scoffed and rose from his seat. "Objection, Your Honor. These men are not a part of this proceeding." But Chris continued, undeterred. "Angela Monroe is innocent. Every piece of evidence you have seen was manufactured, her fingerprints planted, her accounts manipulated, her likeness inserted into footage created to damn her. We can prove it." The reporters leaned forward, their pens scratching faster, their cameras snapping like insects feeding on light. The judge's face turned crimson. "Remove them," he roared at the bailiffs. Yet Rob's voice joined in, deep and calm, cutting through the noise. "We are not here to disrupt justice. We are here to restore it." Angela Monroe gave her life to protect 3 boys who were not her own. She stood against Victor Hale when he sought to sell us back into the hands of corruption, and she has been paying the price ever since. This trial is not about truth, it is about revenge, and we will not allow her life to be stolen by lies. Angela's lips trembled, and for the first time in years she whispered, "Boys." The word hung in the air like a prayer, fragile yet powerful, and the courtroom seemed to pause, caught in the gravity of a mother's love reclaimed in the moment of her greatest defeat. John stepped forward, his voice raw with fury. "You think this is over, but this is only the beginning. For 25 years, men like Victor Hale and Raymond Cole have forged records, faked signatures, and corrupted officials. We have traced the chain. We have the documents, the codes, the witnesses. This court will not bury her story, because we will not let it." The judge's gavel slammed again, but his commands were drowned out by the rising swell of whispers. The gallery was no longer silent. It was alive, buzzing with the electricity of scandal, of revelation, of the possibility that the woman in chains was not a criminal but a victim. The prosecutor tried to sneer his way back into control. "These are baseless allegations from 3 men blinded by emotion." Chris lifted the folder higher. "These are facts," he said coldly. "The real facts. And if you refuse to hear them now, then the world will hear them tomorrow. Because this is no longer a trial, it is an exposure." The house was small, the paint on the walls chipped, the floorboards creaking with age, but it was hers, the only thing she had managed to hold on to after years of hardship. She had buried a husband, worked 2 jobs, and fought off creditors who circled her like vultures. Yet she had managed to keep this house. On nights like this, when the world outside roared with violence, the little home felt like her last refuge. That was when the knock came. At first she thought it was just the wind, but then it came again, hard, urgent, frantic. She rose, her slippers slapping against the wood floor, her hand pausing on the doorknob as a flicker of caution made her hesitate. Who in their right mind would be out in weather like this? She opened the door slowly, and the sight that greeted her froze her in place. 3 boys stood on her porch, soaked to the bone, their faces pale with fear. The oldest looked no more than 12, his jaw clenched tight, as though he were trying to be the protector. The middle boy, maybe 10, clutched the youngest against his chest, a child barely 7 years old shivering violently. Their clothes were torn, their shoes caked with mud, their eyes wide with the kind of terror children should never know. "Please," the oldest boy said, his voice breaking despite his attempt at bravado. "Please, ma'am, we need somewhere to stay. Just for tonight." Angela's first instinct was disbelief. She had heard of runaways, of children abandoned or lost. But to see them here, 3 little souls alone in the night, it made her heart ache with something deep and primal. "Where are your parents?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. The oldest straightened his shoulders. "We don't have any. Not anymore." His words cut through her like glass. She looked up and down the street, but there was no one, just the empty storm and the shadows between the houses. Something in their faces, the desperation mingled with determination, told her they were telling the truth. She opened the door wider. "Get inside before you freeze." They hesitated only a moment before rushing in, their small bodies dripping water onto a rug. She hurried to fetch towels, thrusting them into their trembling hands, watching as the oldest boy carefully dried his brothers before himself. It was such a simple act, but it spoke volumes about who he was. "What are your names?" she asked once they were wrapped in blankets and huddled on her couch. "Christopher," the oldest said, his voice steadier now. "This is Robert, and that's Jonathan." Chris, Rob, and John. Names she would never forget. They told her fragments of their story, halting words about a cousin named Victor, about running away from a house that felt more like a prison, about nights spent hiding in alleys and abandoned buildings. They had nowhere else to go. Angela listened, her chest tightening with every word. She had little herself. Her pantry was half empty, her bank account nearly drained. But as she looked at their faces, she saw something that reached into the deepest corners of her soul. She saw herself years earlier, when she had been young and desperate and waiting for someone to say she mattered. She set tea before them, though they grimaced at the taste, and sandwiches made of the last slices of bread she had. As they ate, her decision crystallized. "You can stay here," she said finally, her voice firm. "Not just tonight, as long as you need." The boys stared at her, stunned. The youngest, John, blinked up at her with wide eyes. "Even if we don't got nothing to give you?" Angela smiled sadly. "You've got everything to give. You've got yourselves. And that's enough." From that moment, something unspoken passed between them. She was no longer just a woman living alone in a rundown house. She was a protector, a mother, a fortress against the storm both outside and in their lives. Later that night, after the boys had fallen asleep on makeshift beds she had prepared, Angela sat by the window, listening to the storm rage on. She thought about the risks. Angela gave them chores to keep their hands busy, encouraged them to study, taught them the quiet rhythms of a household run on love instead of fear. Slowly, their shoulders relaxed, their laughter returned, and the house that had once been quiet now echoed with life. But shadows have a way of crawling back when you least expect them. One evening, as Angela prepared a pot of stew with the few vegetables she could afford, a sharp knock rattled her door. It was not like the timid knock of the boys that stormy night. This one was heavy, demanding, the kind of knock that claimed ownership before a word was spoken. Angela wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door to find a man she had hoped never to see. Victor Hale, tall, broad, and dressed in a cheap suit that tried and failed to hide the cruelty in his posture, stood on her porch. His eyes flicked past her shoulder into the house, scanning for what he already knew was there. "Evening, Angie," he drawled, using the nickname she despised. "Mind if I come in?" Angela's body stiffened. "You're not welcome here, Victor." His smile was thin and humorless. "That's so. Then maybe we should have this conversation on the porch." He held up a thick envelope and tapped it against his palm. "I'll get to the point. Those boys inside? They're mine. Family. Blood. You've got no claim on them." Angela met his gaze without flinching. "They're children, not property. And they don't belong to you." Victor chuckled darkly. "You think you can do better than me? You can't even keep the lights on half the time. You don't have the money, the influence, the connections. I do. I can make sure they've got food, shelter, clothes, everything they need. And if it makes you feel better," he opened the envelope, revealing crisp stacks of cash. $25,000. All yours. You take it, you sign a paper, and you hand those kids over. Nobody has to get hurt." Angela stared at the money, her stomach twisting. $25,000 was more than she had ever seen at once, more than she could hope to earn in years. It could fix the roof, pay off debts, buy stability she had dreamed of but never achieved. For one brief, treacherous moment, the temptation whispered to her. But then she thought of Chris drying his brothers before himself, Rob's soft humming as he concentrated on homework, John clutching her hand when thunder scared him. They were not a transaction. They were not a burden. They were her children now. Slowly, Angela reached out. Victor's eyes gleamed, already certain of his victory. But instead of taking the envelope, she snatched it from his hand and tore it in half, bills scattering like dead leaves in the wind. Her voice cut sharper than the storm that had brought the boys to her. "You'll never have them, Victor. Not for money, not for blood, not for anything. They're mine now, and I will protect them." The smug smile slid from Victor's face, replaced by something darker, something venomous. He leaned in close, his breath hot with fury. "You don't know what you've done, Angie. You've crossed me. You think love's going to shield you? You think those kids are going to save you? You just signed their death warrants." Angela's jaw tightened. "Leave my property, and don't come back." He stepped back, his eyes narrowing into slits. "You'll regret this. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but one day you'll wish you had taken the money." He turned on his heel, stalking into the night, leaving shredded bills fluttering across her porch like ghosts of a deal refused. Angela stood in the doorway long after he left, her heart pounding. She knew Victor meant every word. He was not the kind of man to bluff. He would wait, he would scheme, and he would strike when it hurt the most. But she also knew there was no choice. The boys were hers, and no amount of money could change that truth. When she closed the door and turned back inside, she found Chris standing in the hallway, his face pale, but his chin lifted. "We heard," he admitted softly. Rob peeked out from behind him, eyes wide, while John clung to his brother's sleeve. Angela walked to them, crouched down so she could meet their eyes, and cupped their faces in her hands. "You're safe here," she said firmly. "No one is taking you from me. Do you hear me? No one." Chris swallowed hard, nodding slowly. Rob whispered, "But he'll come back." Angela pulled them close, her arms wrapping around all three at once. "Then let him. We'll be ready. We'll face him together." That night, long after the boys had drifted into uneasy sleep, Angela sat at her kitchen table, staring at the pieces of money still scattered across the floor. She gathered them up and burned them in the fireplace, watching the flames consume what could have been her escape, her comfort, her safety. The fire crackled, and she whispered a vow into the night. Men like Victor Hale did not retreat. They slithered into shadows, plotting and poisoning from places you could not see. She refused to let fear dictate her life, and so she poured herself into raising Chris, Rob, and John as though every single day might be their only chance at normalcy. She gave them structure where chaos had once ruled, discipline tempered by compassion, and the kind of love that did not demand payment or submission. By dawn, she was at the diner working the early shift. By afternoon, she was in classes at the community college. And by evening, she was home with the boys, making sure they ate, studied, and understood that even if the world was cruel, the four of them could still create a space where kindness mattered. It was exhausting beyond measure, but she never let them see how tired she was. She saved her tears for the moments after they were asleep, when she sat with her textbooks at the kitchen table, fighting to keep her eyes open as she read about psychology and education, determined to arm herself with knowledge that could never be stolen. The boys flourished under her care. Chris grew tall and serious, fascinated by rules and fairness, already showing the seeds of the lawyer he would one day become. Rob displayed an instinct for care, always patching up his brothers when they scraped knees or bruised arms, humming softly as he worked, foreshadowing the surgeon's hands he would later develop. John, though the youngest, was restless and curious, forever tinkering with radios and broken appliances, eager to understand how things fit together, his mind already leaning toward the codes and systems that would shape his future. Angela watched them with pride that often stole her breath. She may not have given them life, but she had given them a chance to live, and that mattered more than blood. Yet beneath that fragile peace, shadows stirred. Small oddities began to appear in their lives, things Angela at first dismissed as coincidence. Letters from the bank claiming she had debts she knew she had paid. Notices from school officials questioning the boys' enrollment, suggesting papers were missing or forged. Visits from men in suits who asked strange questions about her employment, about her past, about whether she was truly fit to care for 3 unrelated children. At night, she found her mailbox stuffed with junk mail that bore her name spelled wrong, her address slightly altered, subtle reminders that someone was tampering with the official record of who she was. She recognized the handiwork immediately. Victor. He was manipulating documents, slipping falsehoods into the cracks of bureaucracies that were too overloaded to notice. It was a slow poison, the kind that did not kill immediately but eroded trust, corroded the foundation of her stability. Angela fought back the only way she knew how, with stubborn persistence. She kept meticulous records of every bill, every receipt, every official form. She went to the courthouse herself to ensure the boys' guardianship papers were valid, sat in school offices demanding to know why enrollment was being questioned, argued with banks, until supervisors finally acknowledged their own mistakes. Each time she won a battle, but she knew the war was just beginning. Victor was patient. He was planting seeds that would sprout years later, perhaps when the boys were grown, perhaps when she was too tired to fight. She lay awake some nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how much longer she could shield them from his schemes. The boys noticed the strain, though they pretended not to. Chris, at 14, offered to quit school and work part-time. Rob volunteered to sell his baseball glove to help with money. John asked if he should stop tinkering with radios and start fixing appliances for neighbors. Angela silenced them each time. "Your job is to grow, to learn, to be boys. Let me worry about the rest." They obeyed, but she could see the worry etched in their young faces. The years passed, and somehow Angela balanced it all. She graduated with her degree, the boys excelled in school, and their small household built itself into something resilient, strong, unshakable. Or so it seemed. Then came the day she found an envelope under her door. Inside was a single photograph. Chris walking home from school, Rob at baseball practice, John fiddling with wires in the garage. On the back of the photo were 4 words in Victor's handwriting. "Still watching. Always waiting." Angela's hands shook as she burned the photo in the sink, but the message remained seared into her mind. The community erupted in panic. Search parties combed the streets, and the police canvassed every alley. But Angela knew, before the authorities admitted it, that this was Victor's hand. The phone call came at midnight, Angela's voice tight with dread as she answered. Victor's smooth tone slid through the receiver like oil, mocking and cruel. "I told you one day you'd regret tearing up my money. Well, Angie, that day has come. If you want to see that boy alive again, you'll meet me at Pier 47, and you'll bring your sons. If you don't, the kid's body washes up with the tide." Angela's stomach turned cold, but she spoke with steel. "Leave the boys out of this." Victor chuckled. "Oh no, they're the whole point. You kept them from me, so now I take someone else's, and you're going to learn what it feels like to lose everything. Bring them, Angie, or it all ends tonight." Angela hung up the phone, her hands shaking. But when she looked at Chris, Rob, and John, she saw their determination. They had overheard enough to understand. "We're coming with you," Chris said firmly, his jaw set in the way of a young man already carrying too much responsibility. Angela tried to argue, to protect them as she always had, but the truth was she needed them. Victor wanted a confrontation, and together they might survive it. The docks were deserted when they arrived, the air thick with the stench of salt water and oil, the wooden planks slick underfoot. Moonlight gleamed off the black waves, and in the distance, seagulls cried as though they sensed blood was about to be spilled. Victor emerged from the shadows, flanked by armed men, his grin wide and triumphant. In front of him, bound and gagged, was the missing boy, his terrified eyes glistening with tears. "You came," Victor said mockingly, spreading his arms as though greeting old friends. "And you brought my runaway cousins. How touching." Chris stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Let the boy go." Victor shook his head slowly. No, that's not how this works. You see, Angie here made a choice 25 years ago when she tore up my money. She chose you over reason, over blood. Tonight, I give her one last chance to make the right choice. Hand them over, and the boy goes free." Angela stepped in front of her sons, her voice firm. "You will not touch them. Not now, not ever." Victor's smile twisted into a snarl. He drew a gun, leveling it at her chest. "Then you've chosen death." Chaos erupted in an instant. One of Victor's men shoved the kidnapped boy toward the water's edge, and Rob lunged to grab him, dragging him back just before he toppled into the sea. John, quick-thinking and reckless, grabbed a loose pipe and swung at the nearest thug, the clang of metal against bone echoing in the night. Chris tackled another man to the ground, fighting with the desperate strength of someone protecting everything he loved. Angela confronted Victor directly, trying to wrestle the gun from his hands, but the years had left her weaker than she wanted to admit. The shot rang out, sharp and deafening, and she staggered back, clutching her chest as blood seeped through her blouse. "Mama!" the boys shouted together, their voices raw with terror. Angela fell to her knees, her vision swimming, but even through the pain, her eyes locked on Victor. He looked triumphant, certain that he had finally broken her, but she forced a bloody smile. "You'll never have them," she whispered. Sirens wailed in the distance, closing in fast. Victor cursed, signaling his men to scatter. But as they fled, they left behind more than weapons and chaos. They left behind planted evidence. In the confusion, Angela was found with the gun on the ground beside her, her fingerprints smeared across it, the kidnapped boy babbling through his tears about a woman who had been with the bad men, too frightened to realize he had been manipulated into speaking lies. When the police stormed the pier, they found Angela bleeding, the boys holding her, and Victor's men already vanished into the night. The evidence, false as it was, told a story the authorities were eager to believe. Angela Monroe, disgraced guardian, mastermind of a botched kidnapping plot, wounded in her own criminal exchange. The narrative was too neat, too convenient, and the system Victor had been corrupting for years swallowed it whole. At the hospital, as Angela lay recovering, detectives pressed her for answers. They waved the gun in her face, showed her bank records doctored to suggest secret accounts, produced witnesses who had been paid to testify that they had seen her meeting with Victor. She saw the trap closing around her, the inevitability of it all, and realized that if she fought, the boys would be dragged deeper into Victor's war. The system was ready to crush someone, and if not her, then her sons would become the next targets. Late one night, with the boys asleep in hard plastic chairs beside her hospital bed, she made her decision. She confessed, not because she was guilty, but because her sacrifice could protect them. In her statement, she claimed full responsibility for the events at the pier, weaving a story that cast the boys as innocent bystanders manipulated by her supposed crimes. Her lawyers protested. The boys begged her not to, but Angela's resolve was iron. She had promised them safety, and this was the only way left to keep it. When her trial came, Victor's fingerprints were nowhere to be found. His men vanished into the dark, his name scrubbed clean from every record that might have implicated him. Chris became a relentless attorney, taking cases no one else dared touch, using the law not just as a tool, but as a weapon to cut through corruption. Rob became a surgeon, learning to steady his hands in the chaos of operating rooms, his life dedicated to saving others after failing to save his mother that night at the pier. John turned into a ghost within the digital world, a cybersecurity expert and hacker who could slip past firewalls and peel back the hidden layers of official systems with a keystroke. Each had built a life of purpose, but none of them had escaped the shadow of that night. They gathered once a month at Angela's house, though she was no longer there, to keep the place from falling apart, to remind themselves of the home she had built out of nothing but stubborn love. It was during one of those nights, with the clock ticking past midnight and silence weighing heavy in the air, that the phone rang. Chris picked it up, expecting a client or a wrong number, but the voice that came through was calm, cruel, and commanding. "I've been waiting a long time to speak to the three of you," the man said. "Your mother is still alive, though she won't be for long. You have 6 hours. Kill Raymond Cole before sunrise, or she dies along with hundreds of others." Chris froze, his heart hammering. "Who is this? Where is she?" The caller chuckled. "As if I'd be careless enough to tell you. What matters is the choice. Raymond Cole dies or Angela Monroe dies. Simple as that." Rob leaned in, listening, his face pale but his voice steady. "And if we refuse? If we try to trade ourselves instead?" The man's tone sharpened. "Don't insult me. I learned from Marcus's mistakes. He gave you too many choices, too many ways to maneuver. I won't make that error. The explosives are wired to your mother's vitals. If she watches you die, if her heart rate spikes beyond acceptable parameters, the sensors trigger and the whole block goes up. So don't try any noble sacrifices. Become killers or become orphans." The line went dead, leaving only the faint hum of static and the sound of the three brothers breathing hard in the kitchen where Angela had once taught them their lessons. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Chris whispered, "We can't kill him, even to save her. She would never forgive us." Rob shook his head. "But we can't let her die either. Not after everything she's endured. We fought too hard for this family to lose her now." John slammed his fist on the table. "There has to be another way. She always told us there's a third option, even when it looks impossible. We're not killers. We don't have to play his game." From the corner of the room came a voice they had almost forgotten was there. Detective Harris, older now, more worn by the years. had been following their case for a long time. He had come to believe Angela's innocence, and he had been waiting for the day the truth might crack open. He leaned against the wall, his face grave. "Boys, I've seen desperate people backed into corners before, but I've never seen anything like this. Sometimes the only way to stop a monster is to become one yourself." Chris stared at him, horrified. "You're suggesting we kill Cole? That we play their game?" Harris met his eyes. "I'm suggesting that Cole is a mass murderer who has destroyed lives for a quarter century. If he dies, the world is safer and your mother lives. That might be justice, whether you want to call it that or not." John's voice cut in, sharp and insistent. "No, don't you see? That's what he wants. This whole setup, the impossible choice, the moral corruption, it's his design. He studied us for years. He knows we'd sacrifice everything to save Mama, even our souls. That's the trap. If we kill Cole, we become exactly what she raised us not to be." Rob looked between them, his jaw tight. "So what's the alternative? Let her die so we can keep our hands clean? Is that what you're saying?" John shook his head, his eyes fierce. "No, we find the third way. We stop thinking like individuals and start thinking like a family, the way she taught us. She always said when you're facing an impossible choice, it usually means you're asking the wrong question." Chris frowned, his mind racing. "So what's the right question?" John's voice softened, but the conviction in it burned. "Not how do we save Mama without killing Cole, but how do we save everyone, Mama included, without becoming monsters ourselves? That means Cole too, whether he deserves it or not." The weight of those words hung heavy in the kitchen. Harris shook his head, disbelief written across his face. "Boys, that's admirable in theory, but this is real life. Real bombs. Real consequences. You can't afford idealism." Rob turned to him, his voice calm but unshakable. "It's not idealism. It's what she taught us. If Mama were here, she wouldn't choose between killing and dying. She'd find a way to do both, to save lives without destroying herself in the process." Chris exhaled slowly. "She'd find the path no one else could see, and we have to do the same." The room fell into silence again, but this time it was not despairing silence. It was the heavy, tense silence of men who had chosen their path, no matter how impossible it seemed. They would not kill Cole. They would not sacrifice Angela. Chris and Rob watched him, their nerves frayed, each lost in his own storm of thoughts, but unwilling to let silence claim the room. "It's there," John muttered finally, his eyes narrowing. "You can't hear it clearly until you filter the background, but it's there. Machinery. Big, heavy machinery, not a factory, not construction, printing presses. Old industrial ones." He tapped a key and let the sound play through the small speakers. Underneath the caller's cold voice, the faint rhythm of gears turning, rollers grinding, the steady pulse of machines that had been running for decades. "You hear it?" John pressed. Chris leaned closer, his face tightening. "Yeah, I hear it. What does it mean?" John spun the screen toward them, displaying schematics he had pulled from city records. "There's only one place in this city that still uses machines like that, Cook County Records Facility. It's where official documents are processed, archived, reproduced. Court papers, police reports, legal notices, all of it. If someone wanted to forge evidence, to alter Angela's story from the shadows, this is where they'd do it." Rob's stomach sank as the pieces clicked together. That's how he's been controlling the narrative all these years. Planting evidence, rewriting history, erasing trails. He's been sitting inside the system the whole time, making sure every attempt we made to prove her innocence failed. Chris clenched his fists. And now he's turned that place into a fortress, a bomb factory, and a stage for his final act. John's fingers flew across the keys again. "I'm in the building's network. Cameras are limited, but I can see enough. Parking lots full, but the facility's officially closed. Thermal scans show at least 6 people inside. And here," he tapped again, eyes widening, "these signatures match the output of remote detonation devices. They've wired the entire facility with enough explosives to take out multiple blocks, maybe more." Chris cursed under his breath. It's not just Mama. If those bombs go off, hundreds die. This isn't just about her anymore. It's about preventing a massacre. The weight of that truth pressed down on them like lead, but before despair could settle, another voice slid into the moment, cold and familiar. From the doorway came slow, deliberate footsteps, and when the brothers looked up, their blood ran cold. Monica Reyes, a woman they had once trusted, a woman who had fought by their side years ago when they tried to expose Victor, stepped into the light. She had changed in the years since. They could see it in her hard eyes, the way she carried herself with coiled tension, the way her smile no longer carried warmth, but something brittle, venomous. "You finally figured out," she said softly, almost admiringly. "I wondered how long it would take." Chris stood quickly, his voice sharp. "Monica, what the hell are you doing here? You're supposed to be on our side." She tilted her head, her dark hair falling over her face as she smirked. "On your side? That's the lie you've been telling yourselves for 25 years. Do you remember my little brother? Do you even remember his name? Michael, 8 years old. He died the night Victor made his move, and you three, Angela's golden boys, you let him die. I held him in my arms as he bled out, whispering your names, asking why the heroes didn't save him. Tell me, Chris, Rob, John, what side was I supposed to be on after that?" Rob's voice cracked, his hands instinctively tightening into fists. "We didn't know. We thought he got out. You told us he made it." Monica laughed bitterly, the sound scraping like broken glass. "Because I needed you to believe it. I needed you to live with the illusion that you'd done something right while I waited, while I learned, while I became strong enough to finish what Victor started. He was a monster, but he taught me patience. He taught me how to build the perfect revenge." John's mind raced as he pieced it together. It was you. All of it. The calls, the bombs, the trap. You've been behind this from the beginning, manipulating Cole, manipulating us. Monica's eyes gleamed. "Very good, John. Marcus thought he was in control, but I was the one steering him. Every lie, every forged record, every step that led Angela to prison, I was there. You thought Victor was your enemy, then Cole, but no, it's me. It's always been me." Chris's voice was low, furious. "And you're willing to kill her? To blow up half the city? To kill innocent people, just to settle your score?" Monica's expression hardened, her anger simmering beneath the surface. "Collateral damage. Do you know what that phrase means to someone like me? It means nothing, because my brother was collateral damage to you, to Angela, to all of you who failed him. So why should I care if the city bleeds, if your mother dies, if the three of you finally learn what real loss feels like?" For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by the faint hum of John's laptop still pulling data. The enormity of the betrayal cut deeper than any wound Victor had ever inflicted. They had trusted her, fought beside her, believed she shared their mission, but all along she had been cultivating a revenge that made Victor's schemes look small. Rob stepped forward, his voice quiet but firm. "Monica, listen to yourself. You're not honoring your brother by becoming what killed him. You're not avenging him, you're erasing him." She flinched just for a moment, then her jaw tightened. "Don't try to reason with me. You had your chance 25 years ago. Now it's my turn." She slipped a device from her coat pocket, a small remote with a red light blinking steadily. 6 hours. That's all you have. Kill Cole or Angela dies with half the city. Those are your choices. She turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing like a death knell in the hallway, leaving the brothers in stunned silence, the blinking cursor on John's screen the only movement in the room. Rob sat behind the wheel, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, the surgeon in him already imagining what kind of damage explosives of this magnitude could inflict on human bodies. Chris sat in the passenger seat, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, replaying every word Monica had said, every flicker of emotion in her face. He knew her hatred was real, but he also knew hatred was often a mask stretched over grief. He had seen it in courtrooms, had seen it in the eyes of widows and parents and children who wanted to blame the whole world for one wound. Monica was no different, except she had taken that wound and sharpened it into a weapon she was now pointing at them. By the time they reached the facility, the night was heavy and wet, a fine mist drifting in from Lake Michigan, settling on the hulking concrete building like sweat on the skin of a beast. The parking lot was dotted with vehicles, some old vans with tinted windows, others unmarked sedans, the kind of fleet you would expect from a clandestine operation. John scanned quickly. Thermal still shows 6 inside, maybe more. And Monica, she's not in the cameras. She knows where they are. Chris's jaw tightened. Of course she does. She planned this for years. Rob parked the car in the shadows near the loading dock, and the brothers climbed out, each adjusting the gear they had hastily thrown together. Flashlights taped to pistols, Kevlar vests borrowed from Harris's contacts, earpieces linked to John's network. They weren't soldiers, but they were men who had lived with danger shadowing them for too long to walk in unprepared. They split around the building, Chris moving toward the front entrance, John circling to the rear, Rob staying near the middle to provide backup. The night was so quiet he could hear his own breathing, hear the faint buzz of the streetlights, hear the creak of the old dock boards beneath his boots. And then came the sound he didn't want to hear, the click of a gun cocking behind him. "Hello, Christopher." The voice was unmistakable, smooth but hardened, dripping with bitterness. He turned slowly, his heart hammering, and found Monica Reyes standing less than 10 feet away, her arm steady, her pistol aimed directly at his chest. The mist caught the light from a street lamp, outlining her like some phantom risen from his past. The warm woman he had once known burned away, leaving only this cold figure forged by vengeance. "Monica," Chris said evenly, lifting his hand slightly, palms out. "You don't have to do this." She laughed, short and sharp, like glass breaking. "Don't I? You think you can still talk me down? After everything? You think words can undo 25 years of waiting? My brother died because of you three. Because you thought love was enough to fight monsters. Hope killed him, Chris. Hope got him buried in a grave while you lived." The venom in her voice struck him like blows, but he didn't flinch. He had expected it. "No," he said quietly, his tone cutting through her anger. "Hope didn't kill him. Evil did. Victor and his men killed him. They beat him. They left him. They made choices that ended his life. Not us. Not Angela. Not Hope. It was their evil, not our faith, that killed him." Monica's eyes flickered, just for a moment, the gun trembling slightly. "You don't know what it's like to hold your brother while he bleeds out, whispering your names, asking why the heroes never came. You don't know what it's like to see the light go out in his eyes while you promise yourself you'll never forgive the ones who let it happen." Chris stepped closer, slow, deliberate, never breaking her gaze. "You're right. I wasn't there in that exact moment. I didn't see it the way you did, but I've carried it every day since. We thought he made it because you told us he had. If we had known the truth, we would have burned down the world to save him. But you twisted that truth into a weapon, and now you've spent your life becoming the same kind of monster who killed him. Is that what Michael would have wanted? For his sister to become another Victor Hale?" Her lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes wet but hard. "Don't you dare use his name. Don't you dare pretend you know what he wanted." Chris took another step, the muzzle of her gun almost against his chest now. He could feel the heat of her fury, the pull of her grief. "I know what every little brother wants. He wants his sister to live, to be whole, to be free of the hate that took him away. You think this path honors him, but all it does is bury him deeper. You're not avenging him, Monica. You're erasing him." For a heartbeat, silence fell, the mist swirling around them, the building looming behind like some silent witness. Then Monica exhaled sharply, her hand dropping slightly. "You're wrong," she said, though her voice lacked the certainty it once carried. "But it doesn't matter. You're going in there. You're going to try to save her. And you're going to fail. Because every outcome has already been rigged. Every path ends in tragedy. And when it's over, you'll finally know what I've known for years. Hope is a lie." She stepped back, gesturing with the gun toward the entrance. "Go ahead, Christopher. Be the hero your mother raised you to be. But know this, every choice you make tonight only brings you closer to to watching her die. That's the ending I've written, and there's nothing you can do to change it. Chris stared at her, seeing not just the hardened woman before him, but the frightened girl she had once been, the one who had swung a crowbar to save her brother, the one who had wanted to believe in heroes. He knew he could not break through her tonight, not fully, but he also knew the cracks were there. He could see them, and cracks meant light could still get in. He moved cautiously down a hallway where flickering lights cast jittery shadows, listening to the muffled echoes of footsteps ahead. Over his earpiece, John's voice whispered updates, his tone taut with urgency as his eyes swept through the hacked security feeds. Chris, Rob's on the 3rd floor. They've got him tied up in the document production room. At least 4 guards watching him. They look nervous, like they're waiting for an order that hasn't come yet. If Monica's running this, they don't know they've already been written off. Chris gritted his teeth, his heart pounding harder with every step. Rob, the steady one, the healer who had spent his life stitching wounds closed, was now the one at risk of being torn apart. "I'm on my way," Chris muttered, pulling open the stairwell door and climbing quickly, his hand tight on the grip of his pistol. On the 3rd floor, he pushed into the production room where the rhythmic clank of dormant presses filled the silence. There Rob sat in a chair, wrists bound, face bruised but eyes sharp and focused. The guards ringed him with weapons drawn, their hands unsteady, their eyes darting. One of them barked, "Don't move another step or we put him down." Chris froze, his hands lifting slowly, but his voice was calm, measured, the way he spoke to juries when he wanted to plant seeds of doubt. "You really think Monica Reyes is going to keep her promise to you? You think you're walking out of here alive?" The leader of the guards, a man with lines carved deep into his face, snarled, "She hired us. She said we'd be paid." John's voice crackled into Chris's earpiece. "Play it. Channel 2. Chris pressed a button on the small device at his belt, and suddenly Monica's voice, recorded from an earlier intercepted call, filled the room. "After tonight, there will be no loose ends. The brothers die, Angela dies, the operatives die. Clean slate. No survivors." The words echoed in the chamber like a sentence of death, and Chris watched the guards' faces pale as realization spread like wildfire. One of them lowered his gun a fraction, whispering, She said we'd get out." Chris took a step forward, seizing the moment. "She lied. She's been lying to you, just like she's been lying to everyone for 25 years. You think you matter to her? You're disposable. Just like Victor. Just like Cole. Just like every pawn she's ever used." The leader's eyes flickered with uncertainty, his hands trembling now as he looked at his men. Rob, even tied and beaten, found his voice steady and compassionate. "You have families, children, wives. Do you want them to remember you as killers who died for a woman who never cared about you, or as men who stood up even at the last minute and chose the right side?" One by one the guards shifted, their weapons lowering, their shoulders sagging as the illusion of loyalty shattered. Finally, the leader dropped his rifle with a clatter that seemed to break the tension in the room. "Cut him loose," he ordered hoarsely. A younger guard stepped forward and sliced through Rob's bindings. Rob rubbed his wrists, standing slowly, his gaze never leaving the men who had nearly executed him, but who had now chosen a different path. "Thank you," he said simply. And in that moment, they were no longer enemies, but men trying to claw their way back to redemption. Chris activated his earpiece again. "John, Rob's free. But we need to move. Where's Mama?" John's voice was clipped. "Basement. Strongest explosive signatures are coming from there. And Chris, there's someone with her." Angela Monroe sat in the cold basement, bound to a chair surrounded by wires snaking out in every direction to bundles of explosives packed along the walls. The steady blink of a red light from the central detonator illuminated her face, but she wasn't watching the bombs. She was watching the young man standing guard, a rifle clutched in his hands, his expression caught between duty and fear. Angela's voice was soft calm, the same tone she had once used to soothe 3 frightened boys 25 years ago. "What's your name, son?" The guard shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not supposed to talk to you." She smiled gently. "Humor me. An old woman in a room full of bombs deserves to know the name of the man holding the gun." After a pause, he muttered, "Ethan. Ethan Ward." Angela nodded, her eyes warm. "That's a good name. Strong. You got family, Ethan." His eyes flickered, betraying something tender beneath the hardened surface. "A little sister. She's 8. Angela leaned forward slightly, her voice like a thread weaving through the air. "8's a beautiful age. Still believes in magic. Still thinks the world is mostly good. Tell me, Ethan, what would she think if she knew what her big brother was doing right now? Guarding bombs, helping people who want to kill families like hers." Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle, his jaw clenching. "I didn't know it would be like this. They told me we were stopping terrorists, that we were protecting the city. But now, I don't know what we're doing." Angela's smile was sad but unyielding. Sometimes the hardest choice isn't between good and evil. Sometimes it's between different kinds of love. Love for your family, love for strangers, love for what's right. The trick is, you don't have to choose one over the other. You can love them all. You can protect them all if you're brave enough. Ethan's voice cracked, barely audible. How? How do I do that when everything's already set in motion?" Angela's eyes glistened with tears that did not fall. "By making the choice my sons made 25 years ago when they stood at my door in the rain. They could have walked away, but they didn't. They chose family, even when it cost them everything. Tonight you can do the same. You can choose to save your sister from living in a world where her brother is remembered as a killer. You can choose to be the man she already believes you are." Ethan's shoulders sagged, his breath shaky, and he lowered the rifle a fraction. "The bombs," he whispered, "they're wired to a dead man switch. If the person holding the remote lets go, everything goes up. But there's an override code, 5 digits that disarm it completely." The stairwell groaned as Chris, Rob, and John descended into the basement, their boots striking metal steps like the tolling of a clock running out of time. Their earpieces crackled faintly with the voices of the guards who had switched sides, men now loyal not to Monica, but to their own desperate hope of redemption, holding the upper floors against any reinforcements. The brothers' lungs burned, their bodies aching from hours of tension, but the thought of Angela bound below kept them moving. When they reached the basement, the sight froze them in place. Angela sat in the center of a concrete room lined with explosives, wired into a grotesque web of cords, blinking lights, and plastic cases packed with enough power to collapse the entire block. Ethan Ward stood near her, rifle lowered, sweat beading his brow as though each second was another betrayal of his orders. And at the foot of the stairs stood Monica Reyes, the remote detonator gripped tightly in her hand, her eyes blazing with a fury that masked the tremor in her soul. "You made it," she said coldly, her voice echoing against the stone walls. "Right on time. Now you'll get to watch what real justice looks like." Chris stepped forward, his voice firm but calm. "Monica, you don't have to do this. You've proven your point. You've shown us your power. But if you press that button, you don't just kill us, you kill hundreds of innocent people, people who had nothing to do with what happened to Michael." Monica's face twisted at the name, her finger tightening on the trigger. "Don't you dare speak his name. You killed him with your weakness, with your blind hope. And now you're going to learn what it feels like to lose everything the way I did." Angela's voice cut through the tension, calm and steady, the same voice that had once welcomed 3 frightened boys on a stormy night. "Baby, listen to me. You've carried this pain for so long you don't remember what it felt like before. You loved your brother. You loved him so much it tore you apart when he died. But if you do this, you're not honoring him. You're burying him deeper." Monica's eyes glistened, but she shook her head violently. "No, it's too late for me. I've lived too long in the darkness to crawl back into the light." Angela's gaze softened. "It's never too late. That's what love means. Even at the last moment, even when it seems impossible, you can choose something better. You can choose to be the sister Michael believed in." Ethan stepped forward, his voice unsteady but clear. "Ma'am, I have a little sister. She's 8. She believes her big brother is a hero. Don't make me prove her wrong. Please, don't make me remember tonight as the night I let a child's faith in me die." Monica looked at him, seeing for a moment the boy Michael might have become if he had lived, the man he could have grown into. Her breath hitched, her hand trembling as the weight of 25 years pressed down on her shoulders. Chris pressed the opening. "Monica, you know the code. You can stop this. You can save all of us. You can save yourself." Silence stretched as Monica stared at the blinking detonator in her hand, the countdown of her own vengeance beating in her chest. Finally, in a whisper, she spoke. "It's his birthday, July 15th, 2000, 71520. Ethan lunged for the keypad on the central detonator, his fingers flying as he entered the digits. For a moment the room held its breath, the red lights blinking like the last heartbeats of the city. Then, suddenly, they shifted from red to yellow and finally to green. The hum of the system quieted. The bombs were disarmed. The silence that followed was deafening, a silence broken only by Monica collapsing to her knees, the detonator slipping from her hand as tears streamed down her face. "What have I done?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Angela strained against her bonds until Chris cut them loose, and then she crossed the floor, her movements slow but steady, and knelt beside Monica. She pulled the younger woman into her arms, rocking her as though she were a child again. "You've chosen love, baby," Angela whispered into her ear. "After all these years, you've finally chosen love." The brothers stood in stunned silence, their hearts pounding with relief and disbelief, as the woman who had once sworn to destroy them was now sobbing in their mother's embrace. Sirens wailed outside as the police stormed the building, guided by Detective Harris and the guards who had turned against Monica. Within minutes, the explosives were secured, the operatives taken into custody, and Raymond Cole, drugged and broken, was rolled out of the third floor. His reign of terror finally ended. Detective Harris approached Angela with paperwork in hand, his expression softer than they had ever seen it. "Mrs. Monroe," he said formally, "based on tonight's revelations, the forged evidence, and the confessions we've already recorded, all charges against you have been dropped. You're free." Angela's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled with quiet strength. "And what about them?" She gestured to Monica, to Ethan, to the men who had switched sides at the last moment. Harris frowned. "There are serious charges to face." Angela's tone carried the weight of a lifetime. "They made choices tonight that saved lives. That should count for something." Monica lifted her head, her face streaked with tears. "I'll face whatever comes. I've been running for 25 years. It's time to stop." Chris stepped forward, his voice gentle. "You don't have to face it alone. You're part of this family now. After everything, you're still part of this story." John nodded firmly. Families don't abandon each other, not when it matters most. 6 months later, the small house where it had all begun was no longer quiet. The walls had been repaired, the rooms expanded, the kitchen table replaced with one long enough to seat everyone who now called it home. Angela sat at the head, her sons around her, but also Monica, completing her community service by working with at-risk youth, and Ethan, who visited often with his little sister. Even the guards who had once been enemies came by from time to time, seeking advice, finding in Angela a compass they had never known they needed. They were not a normal family, but Angela smiled as she looked around the crowded table, because normal was never the goal. Love was. It was messy, complicated, sometimes painful, but it was love, and it had turned enemies into kin, traitors into allies, and despair into hope. One Sunday evening, as the laughter rose and the arguments over dishes grew loud, Chris raised his glass of sweet tea. "To Mama, who taught us that family isn't about blood or law, but about choosing to love people even when they don't deserve it." Rob added, his voice soft but strong, "especially when they don't deserve it." Monica, her eyes shimmering, lifted her glass too. "To second chances." Ethan grinned. "To as many chances as it takes." Angela lifted her own glass, her smile radiant. "Because that's what family does. We keep giving each other chances until we become the people we were meant to be." As they toasted together, Angela thought back to that rainy night 25 years ago when 3 boys had knocked on her door, desperate for a place to belong. She thought she was saving them, But in truth, they had saved her, just as they were now saving Monica, Ethan, and even the broken men who had once stood against them. Love had carried them through storms, through betrayals, through prison walls, and threats of death. Love had disarmed bombs not just made of wires and C4, but bombs of hatred, grief, and vengeance. And as Angela looked at her family, the family she had built from broken pieces, she knew the message of her life had finally been written. Love always finds a way. The end. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did the brothers make the right choices, or should they have taken a different path? Share your opinion about the plot in the comments, and let me know where in the world you're watching from. Your perspective helps bring these stories to life. And if you want more powerful stories about family, sacrifice, and the strength of love, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one.